Bill. We now move to the Non-Domestic Rating Multipliers Bill, programme number 2. Motion to be moved formally.
I beg to move.
The question is, as on the order paper, as many of that opinion say aye.
Aye.
The contrary, no. The ayes have it. The ayes have it.
Non-Domestic Rating Multipliers in Private Schools Bill, changed to Non-Domestic Rating Multipliers Bill. Consideration of Lord's amendments.
Now,
I must draw the House's attention to the fact that financial privilege is engaged by Lord's Amendments 1 to 12 and 14 to 17. If any of those Lord Amendments are agreed to, I will cause the customary entry waiving Commons financial privilege to be entered in the journal. We will begin with the Government motion to disagree with Lord's Amendment 1, which we will consider together with the motions to disagree with Lord's Amendments 2 to 19, as on the selection paper. I call the Minister to move the motion to disagree with Lord's Amendment 1. Minister.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Firstly, I am grateful to members of both the Commons and the Lords who have so diligently scrutinised the bill throughout its passage. Before I address the amendments brought forward by the Lords, allow me to remind the House of why we introduced this bill in the first place. This Government has committed to transforming the business rate system, and this bill is a first step on that important journey. We want to achieve a sustainable system that is fit for the current economic landscape, where business growth is supported and ratepayers pay their fair share. Firstly, I would like to thank the Noble Lord Carn of Burnley for taking this bill through the other place and for being so thorough in his approach. I'd also like to thank officers of MHCLG and my private office for all their work on this bill. The Government opposes all amendments before us today, and I will provide further explanation as to that position. At the budget, the Government explained we wanted to introduce new lower multipliers for qualifying retail, hospitality and leisure properties from April 2026 to address the uncertainty of the temporary stopgap support provided by the annual RHL relief. Business rates represent a stable source of revenue for local government, meaning that this permanent tax cut must be sustainably funded. This is why the Government also announced its intention to introduce a higher multiplier for all properties with a rateable value of £500,000 or above. This bill makes provision to enable the introduction of those new multipliers, and so this is the first step to delivering on the Government's manifesto commitment to transform the business rate system to one that is sustainable, protects the high street and that is fit for the 21st century. Yep.
It is a point of detail. He says it's a first step. Do I take from that that there will be further reforms following these reforms for the rest of the business rate system to meet his manifesto commitment to replace the current business rate system completely?
Well, I'm not going to preempt any further decisions on this, other than to say that this represents an important, and I should say a significant step forward. He, like me, as a constituency MP, would have heard many small businesses, retailers, hospitality providers, leisure providers, who, of course, appreciated, no doubt, the support during COVID, but were very clear that it was a cliff edge that was coming to an end, and the previous government didn't provide any certainty about what followed. And what this does is to end that uncertainty and hardwire in a permanent relief system to make sure that those important businesses that are the foundation of our communities and our economy are supported through the tax system. Now, yeah, for the final time, and they'll make progress on the amendment.
Well, it's a very important point, because at one point in his speech already, and he said this in previous speeches, he said it's a first step, and now he says it's a permanent measure. And I totally agree with him that business wants certainty. So it's really important, I think, businesses out there understand, is this a permanent position now that won't be changed, or is it a first step?
Well, I'll go on to explain that in more detail, but the answer is it's both. It's both an important first step and the relief that's being provided, funded through the higher rate properties, will be hard baked into the system. That's notwithstanding any future support that may well follow that we aren't preempting today. Let me make progress. On Lord's Amendment 1, 6, 7 and 12, it would remove the qualifying healthcare hereditaments from the higher multiplier. And Lord's Amendments 2, 5, 8 and 11 would do the same in relation to anchor stores. Considering the challenging fiscal environment, it's vital that this permanent tax cut is funded sustainably. This government has been clear that it will do this by applying the higher multiplier to all properties with a rateable value at or above £500,000. This accounts for less than 1% of all properties, and it's a fairest approach. The impact on healthcare properties is limited. As set out in the other place, of the 16,780 properties at or above the 500,000 threshold, based on the current rating list and rounded to 10, only 350 are in the health subsector. Of these, 290 are NHS hospitals and only 30 are doctor surgeries or health centres. At the autumn budget, the Chancellor fixed the spending envelope for Phase 2 of the spending review. The Government is considering the full range of departmental priorities and pressures as part of the spending review, and this includes any impact of the higher multiplier on public sector properties such as schools and hospitals. And so I urge the House to disagree with these amendments. We of course recognise the importance of anchor stores, and we're doing a great deal to support the high street in this bill and elsewhere. Whilst the largest anchor stores may be caught by the higher multiplier, they are often part of large retail chains that will have a number of properties with rateable value below £500,000. Those businesses will, therefore, overall benefit from lower multipliers. Moreover, whereas the current RHL relief limits... I'll give away.
I appreciate the statement that he's making. In Fareham and Waterlooville, we have some fantastic pubs, whether it's the Golden Lion in Fareham, the Chairmakers in Denmead, or the Heroes in Waterlooville. Many pubs are hubs of our community and, frankly, make a valid contribution to the local economy. They have been under challenging circumstances and have been asking for a cut in business rates. What will be the effect of the Minister's position today?
Well, this is a cash saving for the exact types of business that the Right Honourable Member talks about. We all understand the importance of our pubs to our towns, our villages and our estates, not just as businesses in the economy, but as places for the community to convene, to meet and to build relationships and networks. This is exactly why these measures are being brought in. And again, being brought in a permanent way, because I think a lot of pubs need certainty. They know that the rising cost of supplies, the rising cost of CO2, the cost of energy and the rest of it has put a significant pressure on pub operations, and this is about giving that long-term stability that really bakes into the system the support the government can offer. The other important measure is that, of course, that many pubs will be free houses and they'll be independent, but a number of pubs won't be. They'll be part of a bureau chain with managers in place. These measures take away that cash cap of £110,000 per business, and that allows for the first time multiple operators to benefit from this. That will benefit pub chains, but it'll also benefit the high street stores. Think about Home Bargains and Boots and other retailers, where they are the business that draws footfall in, that then supports independent retailers in the round too. So this is a rounded proposal, and it's about that long-term stability, properly funded in the responsible way. And so on that basis, the government opposes the amendments laid out. On to Lord's Amendments 3, 4, 9 and 10. They're concerned with bringing manufacturing properties into the scope of the lower multiplier. Now, if we widen the scope of the lower multiplier in this way, it will dilute the support available to RHL properties, or it will jeopardise the ability of government to sustainably fund the lower multipliers. We need to be absolutely clear, this is not a wide-ranging offer. This is targeted very deliberately at supporting our communities, our high streets and our town centres, and that's why it's focusing on RHL support and that programme. Now, the government is supporting the manufacturing sector through other means, and it's for these reasons I urge the House to oppose the amendments laid out. Lord's Amendments 13 and 16 require the government to undertake a review of how the provisions in the Act to introduce new multipliers may affect businesses whose rateable value is close to the £500,000 threshold for the higher multiplier. This review would need to be put before Parliament 3 months prior to the 1st of April 2026 in order for clauses 1 to 4 of the bill to come into effect. These amendments probe around the way the multipliers in the business rate system currently operate. These hereditaments on the standard multiplier, or in the future on higher multipliers, pay rates on the multiplier calculated on the rateable value. And it's not just the rateable value above the threshold. This of course, does generate cliff edges in the rates bill for hereditaments as they move between thresholds, and we acknowledge the presence of these cliff edges. It's a matter of fact. At the autumn budget, the Treasury launched a discussion with business on the Transforming Business Rates paper. This specifically highlights these cliff edges in the system and considers whether they may act as a disincentive for businesses to expand. So I can assure the House we are looking at this precise issue identified by the amendment already, and that these reforms are being taken forward through the Transforming Business Rates piece of work and will be phased in over the course of the Parliament. Therefore, we believe that the selection of amendments are unnecessary. Amendment 14 would require the Government to commence a review that examines the merits of creating a separate use class and associated multiplier within the non-domestic ratings for retail services provided by fulfilment warehouses in England that do not have a material presence on local high streets within 3 months of royal assent. The Noble Lord Thurlow, who put forward this amendment, made clear that this use class would only apply to business rates. As the Noble Lord explained in the other place, the key task is to identify these warehouses as distinct from other warehouses used, say, by high street retailers. Warehouses may otherwise look the same. His amendment would bring together the government and professional bodies working in business rates to identify those warehouses. Now, we believe we're already exploring this objective through an existing project. The Digitalising Business Rates project will allow us to match property-level data with HMRC business-level data that will help us to improve the way that we target business rates and identify property and businesses in the way that the amendment envisages.
Minister, give way.
Yeah, I'll give way.
I thank the Minister for giving way, and I wasn't intending to do intervention, but I looked through the amendments, and a lot of them focus on kind of exemptions to the business rates. But would the Minister agree with me, actually, the way to look at supporting businesses like the manufacturing industry, as you mentioned, are through other means and not through changing the business rates?
Well, I mean, through the amendment process, we do welcome the scrutiny and the insight that the other place can provide in the way that we did through the evidence sessions and the committee sessions that we've had. And they do add value to the process. But we also need to be honest, and it's natural in any passage of legislation that members will always want to widen the scope of it and include more. But in government, we have to deal with the art of the possible, and that means balancing a number of competing interests, not least of all the impact on taxpayers in the round. This is a fully funded set of measures targeted at those who need it most, communities and local economies, but fully funded to make sure that it's sustainable. We can't have a situation where we draw it so wide that it doesn't stand the test of time, and in the end, it doesn't cover its own costs. That wouldn't be responsible, and it certainly wouldn't be sustainable. Now, the amendment would also require the Government to implement the recommendations of the review. I trust the House will understand that given we, of course, don't know what the recommendations would be, we can't accept the amendment to accept them blindly in advance. Finally, Amendment 15 and consequential Amendments 17, 18 and 19 will strike from the bill the clause which removes charitable rate relief from private schools that are charities. We are unable to accept this amendment. This Government made a manifesto commitment to raise school standards for every child, to break down barriers to opportunity, and to ensure that every child has the best start in life, no matter where they come from or their financial background. Part of achieving our ambition includes a commitment to removing the VAT and business rates charitable relief tax breaks for private schools, for which the approach and design of this policy has been carefully considered. This is necessary to raise revenue to deliver on the Government's commitment to education and to young people, and to improve the state sector, where, let's be clear, 90% of children are educated. This Government is prepared to take the tough but necessary decisions to deliver on those bold commitments, and so, like all other amendments brought here from the other place, I cannot accept them, and I hope that the rest of the House here follows suit. I beg to move.
The question is that this House disagrees with the Lords in their Amendment 1. I call the Shadow Secretary of State, Kevin Hollinrake.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And can I thank the Minister for his explanation of the members. We shan't agree, but I'll explain why in response to his comments. Can I also thank the Lords for their careful consideration of the bill, in particular my colleagues, the Noble Lord Jameson and Baroness Scott, for their scrutiny and the amendments they have laid. The measures in this legislation come at a particularly critical time for businesses. The withdrawal of retail, hospitality and leisure relief, the partial withdrawal, a policy choice by this Government, is hitting businesses hard. The average pub is over £5,000 worse off as a result of his choices. This, together with their trash talking of the economy, Then the £25 billion annual tax rise to businesses by means of the rise in employers' national insurance, and the prospect of the job-destroying Employment Rights Bill all have directly led to the massive reduction in business confidence. According to the Institute of Directors, business confidence that stood at a high of +5 in July of last year has collapsed to a COVID-level low of -65. I'm very happy to give way.
My right honourable friends make a very, very good speech. What would be his advice to the many businesses in Fareham Waterlooville, of whom I've lost count, who are telling me that they fear whether they will survive the next few years because particularly the rise to national insurance contributions from employers, the Employment Rights Bill, and the anti-business rhetoric. Hiring is down, prices are up, and many businesses in Fareham Waterlooville are beginning to think about whether it's all worth it. Chairman Hollinrake.
Well, she makes a good point, and these are very, very difficult times. I myself was as she knows, was in business for 30 years, and you go through some very difficult times, and many people look at business and think it's easy. It is not. Particularly at times like this, with confidence has gone so low, and consumer confidence has also dropped, which means people are not coming through the door. My advice would be batten down the hatches, get through this where you can, but inevitably the consequence of these choices will mean less employment, lower salary increases and higher prices in both shops, public houses and other places. That's the consequence of the choices this government has made. The real-world effect of that drop in confidence, that historic drop in confidence, is a 20-year high in business closures. Over 220,000 businesses closed their doors in the last 3 months of 2024. So in considering the Lord's amendments today, it's important to remember that the party opposite also promised to abolish business rates. This is another broken promise. And the Minister says in his, and he might have a great deal of time for, but he talks about the art of the possible. But what he's saying in that breath is this is a broken promise on what he promised the electorate and his colleagues promised the electorate into the run-up to that election. Even in their very manifesto, they promised to replace the business rate system so we can raise the same revenue but in a fairer way. This new system will level the playing field between high street and online giants. This is not what this legislation does. That's also a broken promise. I just do not understand, and that's why I challenged the Minister on a couple of occasions in his remarks, how this can both be a first step and a permanent change. That makes no sense, and if I was one of those business people we are all responsible for the rude health of, I would want the people, I'd like to know exactly what the government has planned beyond these changes. That's not clear. First, can I turn to Lords Amendment 14? This amendment will require the Secretary of State to review the merits of a separate use class and associated multiplier for retail services provided by fulfilment warehouses that do not have a material presence on local high streets. In other words, online giants. It's worth noting that the proposed rates regime as set out by this bill will mean only around 10% of businesses paying the higher rate will be warehouses of online giants. In reality, shops, restaurants, cafes, pubs, cinemas, music venues, gyms and hotels will all see their business rates rise as a result of the higher multiplier. We are supportive of a rates regime that would genuinely level the playing field between online retailers and the high street, but this bill does not deliver that. We therefore support Amendment 14's requirements for the Secretary of State to conduct a review into a potential higher multiplier for fulfilment warehouses. This would mean that important anchor stores for the high streets are not punished, which brings me to Lords Amendments 1, 5, 8 and 11. We all know from our constituencies how important anchor stores are, like supermarkets and department stores, for attracting footfall and supporting local economies. When people come into the town centre to use an anchor store, they might stop for lunch in a local cafe or pop into an independent business. Some key anchor stores in the Secretary of State's own constituency are hit by this. Sainsbury's in Ashton-de-Lyme have a rateable value of £1.24 million. M&S next door, £770,000. These have real-world effects, and these are not online giants. We have seen that when anchor stores leave a town, the impact that it has on our communities. For many anchor stores, being dragged into the higher multiplier by this bill could be the straw that breaks the camel's back. All this coming at a time when these shops have already been hit with a jobs tax and will be tied up with even more red tape through the Employment Rights Bill. In fact, the British Retail Consortium has warned the government that the sheer scale of the new costs and the speed with which they occur create a cumulative burden that will make job losses inevitable and higher prices a certainty. What a contrast with my party's proud record of supporting businesses on the high street by cutting business rates to support small businesses, as well with billions of pounds of support through the pandemic. And while we're talking about high street businesses, can I once again push the Minister on a very important point on the retention of small business rates relief? Will he say at the dispatch box that that relief will be continued? Because many businesses' livelihoods depend on that. I have not had clarity, and clearly I'm not going to get clarity today. Is that also on the chopping block? Maybe at tomorrow's the Chancellor's emergency budget. Let's see what that brings. We may get clearer answers. The last gasp attempt at going for growth tomorrow will come at a time when GDP fell by 0.1% in January, which was largely attributed to a 1.1% fall in manufacturing output. Which brings me briefly to Lord's Amendments 3, 4, 9 and 10. These amendments would include manufacturing hereditaments within eligibility for the lower multipliers in respect of local rating lists. This comes at a particularly important time for our manufacturing sector, which is a crucial part of our economy, whether it be automotive, aerospace or precision engineering. And as we now boost capital defence expenditure, it is important we have a strong and resilient manufacturing base that can supply our brave armed forces. I urge the Government to reflect carefully on the impact of manufacturing through the new rate system, and will be listening carefully to the Minister's responses on this issue. Turning to Amendments 1, 6, 7 and 12. At a time when the Government is raising taxes to invest in the NHS, it seems perverse that it's then going to levy higher business rates on the very hospitals, GP practices and, that provide the services so many of our constituents rely upon. This, of course, comes just weeks after they shamefully voted to impose the job tax on hospices, pharmacies and GP practices. Another double whammy. Labour giving with one hand and taking with the other. Before we get to the real sting in the tail of this bill, I'll briefly talk to the Amendments 13 and 16. Like members of the other House, we have concerns about the cliff edge the Minister refers to that this bill will create in the business rate system. A business crossing the £500,000 threshold, even by £1, could see a near 20% increase in rates payable. For instance, a business with a hereditament of £495,000 invested in their property, just enough to be pushed over the threshold, would potentially see an increase in rates from around £175,000 to £325,000 as a result of this bill. It will stifle investment and growth even further. Finally, turning to Labour's education tax. This spiteful and ideologically driven decision to remove the charitable rate relief from private schools at our charities. This sits alongside the utterly wrong-headed policy of charging VAT on private school fees. Regardless of your views on private schools, it is the view of this side of the House that you should never tax education. We're already seeing the gates of independent schools being locked indefinitely, pushing more children into state education, increasing class sizes, putting more pressure on the public purse, more pressure on councils trying to find placements for students with EHCPs. Lord Amendment 17 would retain rates relief for private schools in England, sparing them from the part of a cumulative burden that would otherwise send many of them beyond the brink. It's not only education. Since the government of the introduction of this bill, we have learned that the government will also levy business rates on nursery schools and sports facilities on the site of a private school that are used by the general public. This is a regressive decision that will jack up the costs of swimming lessons, the cost for Sunday league clubs and cadet units. During our time in government, England became one of the top performing countries for education in the Western world, a record this government seems determined to trash. In years down the line, members opposite will regret having voted for this bill as they walk down the high street, passing the boarded up shops, the school gates locked shut, and the local that called last orders years ago for the last time. I urge the government to consider and agree to the amendments from the laws to safeguard businesses, schools and communities across the country for more damaging business and job-destroying tax hikes.
Mark Sewards.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. The bill in its current form is absolutely necessary to support our high streets. It strikes a fairer balance between small businesses and large, and I'm pleased to have contributed to most of the stages of its progress. Now, I rise today to address some of the amendments put forward by the other place, which I think would reduce the effectiveness of the bill in achieving its stated purpose. Amendments 2, 5, 8 and 11 seek to exempt anchor stores from the higher multipliers, thus reducing the overall revenue raised by this bill. Now, by reducing that revenue, the amendments actually reduce the support available to smaller retail, hospitality and leisure businesses, the entire purpose of this legislation. I also have some concern that, as well as reducing the overall revenue, defining what an anchor store is could create problems for our high streets and our town centres. Now, during the debate in the other place, it was said that the Treasury could decide what an anchor store is, but it was also admitted that this would still be a difficult term to define. It's not uncommon, it's not untrue to state that several shops on a high street can indeed lay claim to that title, and I can foresee difficulties there if the amendment was to pass. It's also true that anchor stores can often be the largest store in town, as we've heard in the debate today, usually part of a big chain, with supermarkets being an obvious example. Therefore, the effect of this amendment would be to exempt these larger businesses from the higher multiplier, again reducing the support available to the smaller businesses. Note, the entire purpose of this bill is to support our smaller retail, leisure and hospitality businesses, paid for by that higher multiplier on larger businesses. Unlike the opposition, we like to ensure that our numbers add up. Now, of course I would.
What would he say to businesses who are trying to make their numbers add up when their promise, their commitment in the manifesto and before that was that you were levelling the playing field between online giants and small businesses? And as he conceded, that's not what's happening here. It is many different premises, manufacturers, large bricks and mortar retailers are being hit by these increases. What would he say to them that when there's no sign of any increase in their rates, but because of this bill, that is exactly what they're going to see?
Madam Deputy Speaker, I'm grateful for his intervention. This bill is designed specifically to revive our high streets. He will remember, because his party was in government, that our high streets were struggling. They were suffocating under the last government, and it's incumbent on this new government to revive them. So that's why it's so important that we pass this legislation today. And he makes the point about manufacturing, and his colleague chirps from a sedentary position. But I think it's very important. I think it's very important that we recognise that this government is also supporting manufacturing too. But there are other mechanisms with which to do that. The bill that we are pursuing today, the bill that we are passing today, is all about supporting our high streets, and I'm very proud to support it. Now, I want to talk about Queen Street just briefly in my constituency. Queen Street is in Morley, it's right in the centre. You're welcome to visit any time, Madam Deputy Speaker. There's a lot on offer, and it all comes, almost all of it comes, directly from small businesses. Now, these amendments that we've talked about so far do not prioritise them, nor do they prioritise the smaller parades of shops that we have in Farnley, in Driglington, in Gildersome or Wortley, and it does nothing, they do nothing, for the shops and businesses in Ardsley, Tinglet, Robin Hood or Lofthouse. That's why I can't support these amendments today. I back Morley High Street along with all of the small businesses that I represent in my constituency. Now, moving on, Madam Deputy Speaker, to the only other amendments I'd like to speak on today. I'm going to speak briefly on Lord's Amendments 15, 17, 18 and 19, which would, in effect, reintroduce the tax break for private schools. Now, we've had this argument on private schools at the general election, in this House, in bill committees, and now again today. And as a former maths teacher at a state school in Leeds, I'm more than happy to cover all ground to reinforce an argument. Now, the proposed amendments seek to remove an integral part of the bill that generates the revenue we need to support our plans in government. I will make absolutely no apologies for supporting the 94% of children that attend state schools. We all, and I include everyone in this House, we all want children to have the best opportunities in life with the highest quality teaching in our schools to match. It should be a basic function of the state to provide a well-funded, excellent state school place for all students, whether parents choose to take advantage of that or not. Now, on these benches, as we've proven over recent months, we are prepared to actually take the action necessary to ensure that all children can access the kind of education that they all deserve through the state. So the £70 million that is raised from this measure in this bill today, alongside the other revenue-raising measures that we've taken, Madam Deputy Speaker, in the budget, they will result and do result in a real terms increase in per-pupil funding for the 94% that attend our state schools. And I am very proud to support that. We will never make any apologies for properly funding those state schools by ending the tax breaks that were previously enjoyed by private institutions. That's why I will not be voting for these amendments today. So to conclude, Madam Deputy Speaker, I am pleased to support this bill in its current unamended form. I will support our high streets, it will give confidence to small businesses, and it will give state schools the funding they desperately need.
Home spokesperson, Munira Wilson.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can I also begin by putting on record my thanks to the noble lords in the other place for all their work on this bill, and in particular on the Liberal Democrat benches there, Baroness Pinnock and the Lords Shipley and Fox. Business rates reform is long overdue, and whilst we welcome the proposal to permanently reduce business rates for retail, hospitality and leisure, in the meantime, many businesses across my Twickenham constituency, and indeed the country, are reeling as they see the impact of the reduction in rates relief landing in bills on their doormat. And I've heard from a number of businesses just in the last few days who, and I'm really concerned about pubs, restaurants and cafes in my constituency who are wondering how, with the national insurance rise and this reduction in rates relief, how they're going to continue. Liberal Democrats would like to see a fundamental overhaul of the business rate system, not just these changes which tinker around the edges as sticking plaster solutions, as proposed in this bill. And lower business rates, as I've said, for retail, hospitality and leisure are a step in the right direction, but there are countless small businesses outside of these sectors that need their tax burden reduced too, for example, manufacturing businesses. Now, we tabled amendments to report stage to improve the bill and to ensure it gave consideration as to whether there should be provision for manufacturing facilities, given they can be big facilities built on expensive land and sometimes producing relatively low-value goods. Lord's Amendment 4 sought to do the same, whereby manufacturing premises would also pay new lower business rates under this bill. And without this, light engineering and printers, amongst other businesses in our town centres, mixed economies, potentially face being priced out. A recent report by Barclays Bank concluded that the words "made in Britain" were worth an additional £3.5 billion to UK exporters. So it is important that something is done to support the manufacturing sector. We've learnt the hard way in recent years with a pandemic and wars that we need to be much more self-sufficient as a country. Yet there's been a big drop in confidence in the sector since the autumn, with an increase in manufacturers' costs and orders in general reported to be smaller in size. This comes on top of the additional Brexit red tape that these businesses have to contend with in order to export. Therefore, we are supportive of retaining this amendment in the bill. As I've said already, we want to see fundamental reform of business rates so that we can boost small businesses and our high streets. We tabled an amendment at report stage to require a review of the impact of the Act on businesses, high streets and economic growth. And so we support retaining Lord's Amendment 13, which would require the Secretary of State to review the impact of the bill on businesses whose rateable value is close to £500,000 and so will be caught by the new higher business rates. Turning now to our NHS. Madam Deputy Speaker, yet again we see this government giving with one hand and taking with the other. As with the national insurance contributions, so with these business rate changes, there are unintended but significant consequences for our health service. Lord's Amendment 1 sought to exclude hospitals and other healthcare settings from paying new, higher business rates for properties with a rateable value of £500,000 or more. Without this amendment, 290 local hospitals will be caught by the rates, an unacceptable new burden when the NHS is already struggling. And as my noble friend in the other place, Baroness Pinnock, has pointed out, without this amendment, the likes of Great Ormond Street Hospital for Children will have an additional burden of £600,000 per year on business rates alone. The John Radcliffe in Oxford has a potential business rates increase from £3.4 million to £4.1 million, and the Hull Royal Infirmary could see its bill rising from £1.8 million to £2.1 million. And those are typical figures for hospitals across the country. I do not believe it is the government's intention to reduce hospitals' abilities to drive down their waiting lists, yet that is exactly what the impact will be of these changes and the consequent higher charges. Therefore, we are supportive of retaining this amendment in the bill. Now, moving on to education. This bill also levies a tax on education by removing the business rates exemption for private schools that are charities. This measure will be compounded by the government's move to levy VAT on private school fees and the increase to employers' national insurance contributions. As I have said many times since the general election and indeed before, the Liberal Democrats are opposed in principle to the taxation of education as it is a public good. I will give way in a moment. We strongly support and champion parents' right to choose, which both of these tax measures are an assault on. I happily give way to the Honourable.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I'm incredibly grateful to the Honourable Member for giving way. Would she not accept that this party, this government, won an election on the promise that we would introduce VAT on private school fees, and therefore it's incumbent on us to deliver that manifesto pledge?
I'm very grateful for that intervention, Madam Deputy Speaker, because I'd gently remind the Honourable Gentleman that actually his party won the election with less than 34% of the vote.
Exactly right. It's a landslide.
Right? Less than 34% of the vote, and I can't remember what the turnout is, but if we do the percentages, 60%, and I can't do the maths quickly enough. Clearly I need to do maths to 18.
1 in 5 voters, 1 in 7 adults.
Basically, not many voters voted for his manifesto. I'll happily let him continue to plough that furrow, because I've had that argument made to me in the petitions debate on VAT on private school fees just last week. So he wants me to give way again? I'll happily give way.
I'm incredibly grateful. The simple fact is we have the electoral system we have, and whoever wins a majority, it's incumbent on them to deliver their manifesto pledges to govern the country. So while she may take issue with the electoral system we have, it is what we have, and we must deliver our manifesto pledges.
I'd respectfully say to the Honourable Gentleman, a rise in national insurance on employers was not in his manifesto. A cut to the winter fuel allowance was not in his manifesto. The farmers' tax was not in his manifesto. Yet these are all things that he's implementing. So I'm not going to give way on. If he wants to make a different point to what was in his manifesto that was not voted for by many people, then I'm not going to give way on his manifesto. But I want to come. I will pick up on another point he made earlier. So Clause 5, which implements the removal of charitable rate relief for private schools, undermines this principle that I've talked about, that we shouldn't be taxing education, we should support parents' right to choose. It will undermine the ability of independent schools to undertake the brilliant partnership work that they do in our communities and with state schools. And I've talked many times in this place of Lady Eleanor Hollis and Hampton School in my constituency, who have done amazing work with really underprivileged communities in the Feltham area, with Reach Academy in Feltham, which and helped transform the life chances and outcomes for young people in that community. It will also, I'll give way in just a moment, this measure will also limit those schools' abilities to extend bursaries to children from more disadvantaged backgrounds. I'll give way to the right honourable lady.
You're right in terms of what she's saying on private schools, and I agree with everything she said on that point. And would she agree with me that as well as the damaging effects on children going to private schools, say for example in Hampshire, where we have thousands of young people attending independent schools, but the state schools are running at nearly 100% capacity. So this is going to push hundreds, if not thousands, of children into state schools, which are already full, thereby harming and undermining the education of all children. Isn't that just something which is unforgivable?
I thank the Right Honourable Lady for her intervention, and I am aware from talking to colleagues that there are real pressures on school places in different parts of the country and where there will be a negative impact. And if I think about my own constituency and my own borough, and indeed across London, we are struggling at the moment with secondary school places, although I should say that actually there are falling roles in primary schools which will then feed into the secondary sector. So I think it's different in different parts of the country in terms of the pressures of children leaving the private sector to go into the state sector. But just on the principle, removal of the business rates exemptions for schools that are charities and the levying of VAT on private schools, taken together, Madam Deputy Speaker, will perversely only serve to make independent schools more elitist and less accessible to many families up and down the country. And I think this seems to be at odds with what this Labour government purports to stand for. And I'm really perplexed, Madam Deputy Speaker, as to why ministers are so keen to push through these measures, yet just last week they marched Labour MPs through the no lobbies when Liberal Democrats sought to impose a profit cap on the shameless profiteering of private equity-run special schools, which are bankrupting our local authorities and meaning that many vulnerable children are missing out on the support they need for their special needs because of the behaviour of some of these companies. So they wouldn't take action on that, but they're very happy to tax parents and take away rates relief for those schools operating as charities. And before I come to a close, I just wanted to address the point that the Honourable Member for Leeds South West and Morley made in his speech. I mean, he said how all of this money raised from business rates exemptions and VAT on private schools was going to help fund the state sector. Can I point out to him gently that it was his Education Secretary before Christmas, and it's been confirmed by some data released by the Department for Education this week, wrote to the Teachers' Pay Review Body to essentially say that teachers should be given a pay rise that was going to be higher than the extra funding that our state schools are going to be given for the coming financial year. The result of this is that many schools, state schools across the country, which are already feeling the pinch, are going to have a shortfall in funds. I can tell him schools in my constituency already run Amazon wish lists for things like glue sticks, for whiteboard markers, for tissue boxes. They are relying on PTAs to buy new furniture. Right, so there are so many. Our state schools are already struggling, and actually, the money he's saying that is going to be raised is not going into state schools because they're not being funded sufficiently. So this nirvana of state schools that he claims we're going to have simply doesn't exist. And I see he wants to come in on me.
Well, she's been the honourable member has been very grateful, very generous with her time. On this point about funds for state schools, on the points that she made earlier about the other difficult decisions that this government has had to make, does she not accept that when we got into power, we found a government had been absolutely ruined by the previous party, by the Conservative Party? We found every department in reserves, and we found a £22 billion black hole that must be filled because we are the party of economic responsibility.
I thank him for his intervention, and where we can make common cause is the absolute mess that the Conservatives left both our public services and our economy in. I have no quibble in agreeing with him on that point. We Liberal Democrats set out a whole series of tax measures. Actually, we were the only party that was not afraid to put forward revenue-raising measures. But his government is choosing not to accept any of those, whether it's taxing our big tech giants who are ruining the mental health of our children and young people.
They're even saying they're going to cut it.
Yeah, taxing them. In fact, they're planning to slash that tax altogether. Whether it's reversing the tax cuts the Conservatives gave to the big banks so that we can continue putting free school meals on the table for children, which again his government is thinking of cutting. Whether it's reforming capital gains tax.
Sit down.
Can I remind the Honourable Lady that we're in fact debating Lord's Amendment 1 and the government motion to disagree? Munira Wilson.
I apologise to Madam Deputy Speaker. I was simply seeking to address the Honourable Gentleman's point. I'm coming into land now. Time and again, we see government policy at odds with their stated objectives. Whether it's tackling NHS waiting lists and then slapping business rates onto large hospitals and national insurance onto our GPs, hospices and social care providers. Whether it's claiming to drive growth, then slapping business rates onto much-needed manufacturing and putting a cliff edge onto some of our small businesses in our town centres. Or whether it's extending opportunity to all and then going after charitable independent schools that are serving their wider communities, not to mention punishing the parents who dare to make that choice for their children. Madam Deputy Speaker, amidst some good intentions, the government has lost its way in parts of this bill, so I implore ministers to genuinely consider the amendments before them today in order to support our hospitals and now allow businesses up and down our country to grow and flourish.
The question is that this House disagrees with the Lords in their Amendment 1. As many as of that opinion say aye.
Aye.
Of the contrary, no.
No.
Division, clear the lobby. That this House disagrees with the Lords in their Amendment 1. As many as are of that opinion say aye.
Aye.
Of the contrary, no.
No.
The tellers for the ayes are Jen Kitchen and Christian Wakeford. The tellers for the noes, Sir Ashley Fox and Paul Holmes. Order.
The ayes to the right, 316. The noes to the left, 183.
The ayes to the right were 316. The noes to the left, 183. So the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Unlock. We now come to the motion to disagree with Lord's Amendment 2. I call the Minister to move the motion.
Move formally.
The question is that this House disagrees with the Lords in their Amendment 2. As many as of that opinion say aye.
Aye.
Of the contrary, no.
No. Aye.
Division. Clear the lobby. The question is that this House disagrees with the Lords in their Amendment 2. As many as of that opinion say aye.
Aye.
Of the contrary, no.
No.
The tellers for the ayes are Jen Kitchen and Christian Wakeford. The tellers for the noes, Sir Ashley Fox and Paul Holmes. Order, order.
The ayes to the right, 322. The noes to the left, 117.
The ayes to the right were 322. The noes to the left, 117. So the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Unlock. We now come to the motion to disagree with Lord's Amendment 3. I call the Minister to move the motion.
Move formally.
The question is that this House disagrees with the Lords in their Amendment 3. As many as are of that opinion say aye.
Aye.
Of the contrary, no.
No. Aye.
Division. Clear the lobby. The question is that this House disagrees with the Lords in their Amendment 3. As many as of that opinion say aye.
Aye.
Of the contrary, no.
No.
The tellers for the ayes are Jen Kitchen and Anna McMahon. The tellers for the noes, Sir Ashley Fox and Paul Holmes. Order.
The ayes to the right, 316. The noes to the left, 180.
The ayes to the right were 316, the noes to the left 180, so the ayes have it, the ayes have it. Unlock. We now come to the motion to disagree with Lord's Amendment 4. I call the Minister to move the motion.
Move formally.
The question is that this House disagrees with the Lords in their Amendment 4. As many as that opinion say aye.
Aye.
Of the contrary, no.
No.
Aye.
Aye.
Division. Clear the lobby. Can I just check? The question is that this House disagrees with the Lords in their Amendment 4. As many as that opinion say aye. Aye. Of the contrary, no. Division off. And now can I move? We now come to the motion to disagree with Lord's Amendment 5. I call the Minister to move the motion.
Move formally.
The question is that this House disagrees with the Lords in their Amendment 5. As many as of that opinion say aye.
Aye.
Of the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. We now come to the motion to disagree with Lord's Amendment 6. I call the Minister to move the motion.
Move formally.
The question is that this House disagrees with the Lords in their Amendment 6. As many as of that opinion say aye.
Aye.
Of the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. We now come to the motion to disagree with Lord's Amendment 7. I call the Minister to move the motion.
Move formally.
The question is that this House disagrees with the Lords in their Amendment 7. As many as of that opinion say aye.
Aye.
Of the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. We now come to the motion to disagree with Lord's Amendment 8. I call the Minister to move the motion.
Move formally.
The question is that this House disagrees with the Lords in their Amendment 8. As many as of that opinion say aye.
Aye.
Of the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. We now come to the motion to disagree with Lord's Amendment 9. I call the Minister to move the motion.
Move formally.
The question is that this House disagrees with the Lords in their Amendment 9. As many as are of that opinion say aye.
Aye.
Of the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. We now come to the motion to disagree with Lord's Amendment 10. I call the Minister to move the motion.
Move formally.
The question is that this House disagrees with the Lords in their Amendment 10. As many as of that opinion say aye.
Aye.
Of the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. We now come to the motion to disagree with Lord's Amendment 11. I call the Minister to move the motion.
Move formally.
The question is that this House disagrees with the Lords in their Amendment 11. As many as are of that opinion say aye.
Aye.
Of the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. We now come to the motion to disagree with Lord's Amendment 12. I call the Minister to move the motion.
Move formally.
The question is that this House disagrees with the Lords in their Amendment 12. As many as of that opinion say aye.
Aye.
Of the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. We now come to the motion to disagree with Lord's Amendment 13. I call the Minister to move the motion.
Move formally.
The question is that this House disagrees with the Lords in their Amendment 13. As many as are of that opinion say aye.
Aye.
Of the contrary, no. No. Division. Clear the lobby. The question is that this House disagrees with the Lords in their Amendment 13. As many as of that opinion say aye.
Aye.
Of the contrary, no.
No.
The tellers for the ayes are Anna McMahon and Jen Kitchen. The tellers for the noes, Sir Ashley Fox and Paul Holmes. Order, order.
The ayes to the right, 320. The noes to the left, 180.
The ayes to the right were 320, the noes to the left 180, so the ayes have it, the ayes have it. Unlock. We now come to the motion to disagree with Lord's Amendment 14. I call the Minister to move the motion. The question is that this House disagrees with the Lords in their Amendment 14. As many as are of that opinion say aye.
Aye.
Of the contrary, no.
No.
Division. Clear the lobby. Is that this House disagrees with the Lords in their Amendment 14. As many as of that opinion say aye. Aye. Of the contrary, no. No. The tellers for the ayes are Anna McMahon and Jen Kitchen. The tellers for the noes, Sir Ashley Fox and Paul Holmes. Order.
The ayes to the right, 320. The noes to the left, 179.
The ayes to the right were 320. The noes to the left, 179. So the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Unlock. We now come to the motion to disagree with Lord's Amendment 15. I call the Minister to move the motion.
Move formally.
The question is that this House disagrees with the Lords in their Amendment 15. As many as are of that opinion say aye.
Aye.
Of the contrary, no.
No.
Division. Clear the lobby. This House disagrees with the Lords in their Amendment 15. As many as of that opinion say aye. Aye. Of the contrary, no.
No.
The tellers for the ayes are Anna McMahon and Jen Kitchen. The tellers for the noes, Paul Holmes and Sir Ashley Fox. Order, order.
The ayes to the right, 319. The noes to the left, 166.
Yeah.
The ayes to the right were 319. The noes to the left, 166. So the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Unlock. Order, order. I must now put the questions necessary to bring to a conclusion proceedings on the Lord's amendments. We now come to motion to disagree with Lord's Amendment 16. I call the Minister to move the motion.
Move formally.
The question is that this House disagrees with the Lords in their Amendment 16. As many as of that opinion say aye. Aye. Of the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. We now come to the motion to disagree with Lord's Amendment 17. I call the Minister to move the motion.
Move formally.
The question is that this House disagrees with the Lords in their Amendment 17. As many as are of that opinion say aye. Aye. Of the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. We now come to the motion to disagree with Lord's Amendment 18. I call the Minister to move the motion.
Move formally.
The question is that this House disagrees with the Lords in their Amendment 18. As many as are of that opinion say aye. Aye. Of the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. We now come to the motion to disagree with Lord's Amendment 19. I call the Minister to move the motion.
Move formally.
The question is that this House disagrees with the Lords in their Amendment 19. As many as of that opinion say aye. Aye. Of the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Minister to move that a committee be appointed to draw up reasons.
I beg to move that a committee be appointed to draw up reasons to be assigned to the Lords for disagreeing to their amendments. That Jim McMahon, Kate Dearden, Lavender Mishra, Mark Ferguson, Steve Yem, Kevin Hollinrake and Bobby Dean be members of the committee. That Jim McMahon be the chair of the committee. That 3 be the quorum of the committee. And that the committee do withdraw immediately.
The question is that a committee be appointed to draw up reasons to be assigned to the Lords for disagreeing to their amendments 1 to 19. That Jim McMahon, Kate Dearden, Navendu Mishra, Mark Ferguson, Steve Yem, Kevin Hollinrake and Bobby Dean be members of that committee. That Jim McMahon be the chair of the committee. That 3 be the quorum of the committee. That the committee do withdraw immediately. As many as are of that opinion say aye. Aye. Of the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. That concludes consideration of Lord's amendments to the non-domestic rating, multipliers and private schools bill.